For those of you joining, welcome. This is an executive panel discussion, employee engagement and recognition, trends and tips for 2024. And we're going to get started in about 30 seconds here. Okay, welcome. Very excited for all of our folks that are joining us virtually. My name is Matthew Willis. I'm a Senior VP with a company called AdvantageClub. We have 4 million users, 120 countries, and we do employee engagement and recognition. And as part of what we do is we try to provide thought leadership on a bi-monthly basis with some of the executives in the field who are practicing all things related to employee engagement, recognition, culture. And so we have a real all-star field here today to talk with us about some of the trends and tips they are seeing personally with their organizations and also in the marketplace. So to get us started, we'll give you a quick map of what we're going to cover today. The next slide. So first is we're going to give you a quick update, a couple slides on what are the trends and what are the landscape. And then we're going to go into 3 big topics today with our panelists. Hey, how do we understand employee needs? A lot has changed post-COVID. What are we seeing out in the marketplace? Secondly, how to engage employees, tips and tricks, and recognizing employees. What are some tips from the panelists? So before we move forward, I just want to give a quick intro to who we're meeting with today. Number 1, we have Jennifer Jackson, who is with the firm Sullivan Strickler, where she's the Chief Relationship Officer. Jennifer hails out of Atlanta and has a long, illustrious career managing both for-profit and many not-for-profit global organizations and teams. She is a serial entrepreneur. She is a company co-founder, and she has a special expertise in the legal tech and professional services world. In addition to Jennifer, we have Mark Cunningham. Mark is an executive today with ResultsCX, where he manages over 23,000 employees. He is affectionately known on his LinkedIn as the talent guy, which I love, putting people at the heart of customer experience. Mark has a long and very credible experience and resume with such small companies as Countrywide, Xerox, etc. So very excited to have him talk to us and really an expert in fully engaged workforces and how to support those workforces. And finally, we have Emily Pelosi. She received her doctorate in organizational development. And Emily has spent a lot of time over the last several years with very small companies like Amazon, CenturyLink, and Intuit, where she does employee experience and really looks at the analytics behind key HR and business performance metrics. Also has a wonderful moniker as the employee listening head at Intuit. So very excited to have just a great panel today. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with just some stats to kind of set the landscape of what's going on out there today. So 2024, what's going on? Well, the punchline is the job market is still tough. We're still having problems bringing in people, and it's hard to retain people. So from Gallup, 78% of people are not fully engaged at work. And that means over half of our employees today in North America, they're looking for their next job, either actively or passively. And we have 33%, up to 33% of new hires are still looking for another job, or they leave within 90 days. So that's across all industries. That's from Gallup. In addition, from Deloitte, the disengagement costs, so lack of productivity, costs up to 34% of an annual salary when you have a disengaged employee. So we have a real problem on our hands. Next slide. Secondly, companies believe they are engaging employees. And if we were all together and we say, hey, raise your hands if you're doing something for your employees, are you engaging them? Are you recognizing them? Almost everyone's going to say yes. All of our CEOs are going to say, absolutely, we do things for our employees. But there's a disconnect, right? So 90% of business executives are going to say, yes, we recognize our employees. But if you turn around and talk to the frontline employees, say, hey, have you received recognition? Up to 68% are going to say, no, I haven't received any recognition over the last year. And with Gen Z, it's higher. We're feeling excluded at work, right? We're not maybe working together, we're remote. The silver lining is, for those same people that say, hey, I'm not being included, there is a high level of, hey, if you include me, then I'm all in. Then I'm excited. So there is an opportunity out there today that exists. If we can engage, we can recognize there's a big uptick. And that's what people want in today's environment. So let's move on to our first topic today for the panel, understanding employee needs in a remote world. Now, we've all learned pre-COVID, now post-COVID, people are not as happy in the workplace than they were 5 years, 10 years ago. But different employees have different needs. So how do we address those? And if we look at the next slide, we've got the Jess Bershman Company. It did some analytics across industries, and they came up with 6 areas that employees are saying, hey, here is our needs. And they ranked those in terms of high to moderate, in terms of what I need. This is a busy slide. You will have access to this after our presentation. But what are we hearing? We're hearing, hey, number one, I need to feel as an employee trust in my company. I need the mission. I need a transparency. I need to feel like people are investing in me. In addition, I need a supportive workplace, inclusion, diversity. Then I need career growth, well-being, leadership, and purposeful work. So that's what we're hearing. And that has been exaggerated in this post-COVID world where we're not all working together simultaneously. So let's go ahead and ask the panel. And I'm going to start with Emily first, and then we'll go to Mark and then to Jennifer. What are you seeing either at your own organization, at Intuit, Emily, or in the marketplace, trying to understand employee needs? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, that's a great question to kick us off. I had a feeling you were going to start with me first. But I guess when we're looking at, what employees need at this time, I really like to try to find the common threads between what we know already versus what's new and different. And so I know there's been a lot of discussion across the industry about what remote employees need versus those that are in an office. But the reality is we have a lot of distributed teams now, right? We did a lot of hiring during the pandemic with people all across the globe. And so the workforce does look different. The way that we work does look different. But I think it's important to remember that the core needs that people have for what makes them love their job and their company has not changed. When you look at the research on what really drives engagement and what employees need, I think a lot of it shows up on this slide that we're looking at, actually. So trust, transparency, I think maybe those things are more important now, but we've always needed those. Employees have always needed to feel that their jobs are meaningful. They need opportunities to connect with other people. And they need to have autonomy. They need to be able to do their jobs and feel good at them. And that is the formula for engagement that hasn't changed in over 100 years. So it's a little bit of a hot take, as much as things have changed, especially with COVID, with technology, with a handful of other global crises we've been facing in the last several years. Those core things remain unchanged, although the way we action them might look a little different.
That's great. Mark?
So, building on top of what Emily has stated, I think the umbrella word I would use is that they are seen and they have a sense of belonging. Those all result in loyalty to the brand and loyalty to one another. And when you have loyalty to one another, you have those building trusted relationships. It's harder for people to disengage and want to go somewhere else. The one thing that we're seeing in ResultsCX is, and as I have the privilege of sitting down with our people around the world, I ask them one question: why are you still here? And the number one answer they say is, well, in our culture, it feels like I work with family and friends, and I feel my supervisor's got my back and they're trying to help. So we foster not so much valuing our statements or our value statements, but valuing behavior that makes those value statements sincere and authentic. So respect in everything you do with each other and our customers, of course, dignity in the way that you behave with one another, and inclusivity, meaning that there's always room for your opinion and your advice and your thoughts. And if the table gets crowded, let's go get even more chairs and get a longer table, because people need to feel like their advice when they're asked matters to other people. And when you do that, those all result in a sense of belonging. So the one thing that our people tell us all the time is wellness, the emotional wellness, the physical wellness, and also the financial literacy and wellness. A lot of our employees, 90% of our employees in the customer care world are hourly workers around the world, sometimes young, sometimes beginning their careers. And so they want to feel good about themselves emotionally, physically, financially. And so these are the kind of programs that they ask us to help them with.
That's great. Jennifer?
Yeah, so I want to go back to that opening slide, or you don't have to go back, but I'm just going to reference that number that 78% of employees are not engaged is so alarming to me. And yes, thank you. To me, that really jumps out at me, and it makes me even want to be more intentional in connecting people to the mission. Everything that Emily and Mark said is key. And one of the things I'll just sort of underscore, Mark, you used the word, people want to be seen and heard, right? They want to know their value. They want to know they're seen and heard. So in this new landscape of engaging employees, to me, it just takes a little more intentionality, because I can't walk down the hall like I used to as much and just connect and say, hey, you want to grab lunch, or you want to go grab a glass of wine after work. That doesn't happen. So the intentionality of, hey, what were your thoughts on that meeting? Hey, how are you feeling? Hey, how did your basketball game that you coached go last weekend? To me is much more important. And because that's the only way we're going to stay connected. And then the other on that chart that I really, we focus on a lot in my current role is that ongoing training and growth. We give every employee budgets a year, and we don't care how they spend it. Obviously it needs to be something that can grow them professionally. But we don't care if it's an industry standard tech training. We just want them to feel like they have money that they can spend every year doing something that means something to them. Specifically for me, I go to a C-level forum where I can meet other executives, women executives. So I wanted to that jumped out at me too on that slide about the ongoing development and growth. That is something that we have to be much more intentional about as well in this current environment, because we've got to shift that 78% number. That I feel like I see it when I go out shopping. I see it when I am engaging in the marketplace, but we have a real chance, everyone on this webinar, to move the needle on that number.
That's great. Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so we have a little bit of tips on how do we find out employee needs. Let's move from needs to this idea of engagement. So if we go to our next slide, what are we seeing in terms of engaging employees? And speaking over the last several years, we have very large companies around the world that we work with, in addition to lots of small companies. And we're seeing a big push in terms of engagement, kind of 5 areas. And these 5 areas are: number one, meaningful feedback. Now, what does that mean? That means virtually every company we're talking to is doing some form of training with leaders or engaging in different ways to get feedback. Not just the customer satisfaction surveys, but more surveys, deeper surveys, better one-on-one time, more meaningful feedback from employees. Second is, and Jennifer just alluded to it, career training. So actually taking on specific action items from what we learned with employee needs, right? Where can we inject more professionalism, more career training for our employees? Then we see a big emphasis, volunteering is a big catch-all, but designed around, hey, not something that is directly in the employment field, but how can we use our time, celebrate our time outside of the our workplace? So that's another way we can connect folks. Then we see employee groups, and big wave of this happened even pre-COVID, employee resource groups, getting like employees together to talk about things like diversity or to talk about things like career training. We're seeing more and more employee groups, and some of those that are less formal. So employee groups that could be Dallas Cowboys fans, right? And we've got those folks from all over the place. We're seeing cooking clubs, but we're seeing groups that are both professional, but beyond professional ways of engaging our employees together. And then finally are the events and fun. So not only the happy hours, but where can we get together physically, or if not, being more intentional about those virtual events together. So those are, I think, the big 5 that we're seeing. And I now want to turn it over to my panel of experts and say, hey, Mark, you've got a very large organization. What are you seeing there personally or from your past ways to engage employees today?
So we see very, very, very high employee engagement around the world. So our largest population center for the company is in the Philippines, and then we are in also the US, Mexico, Honduras, Bulgaria, Ireland, UK, et cetera, and now South Africa. So we have a diverse group of interests by country, culture, by age group, by all kinds of things. But the one thing that we try to do is set a theme every quarter. But we allow that to be a global theme that we all agree upon. It's tied into some of our corporate social responsibility. It's also tied into what we know to be interesting in the business, but we let the purpose and the relevance take place at the local level. So for example, if it's on environment or it's on education or it's on, something else, we set the standard. We say, here's our global theme for this month and for this quarter, but how are you going to manifest that locally? So purpose and relevance to the employees is most important, I think, in getting them to participate, because they come up with the most creative and fantastic ideas. It involves community, it involves charity, it involves working together in teamwork to come together around a common cause that's important to that local city or that local team. And we see that, employee groups, for example, we do a lot with military spouse employment. We have an agreement with the Department of Defense. Military spouses have an unemployment of like 25% because they're always moving. And so what we try to do is find ways that infuse diversity, inclusivity, and inclusion around common things that people are interested in participating with. Now, for career pathing and like that, people don't want to stay if they don't have a clear path to something they're interested in. So keeping that alive and employee communication is key at the direct level between the employee and their manager and their manager's manager, but also as a company, telling the employees what our philosophy is, telling them what opportunities are out there, posting things internally and sending out reminders. Hey, remember, if you're looking for the new opportunity, talk to your manager about it, but also go online and see what else we have for you. We always believe in promoting from within and giving opportunities at home first.
Thanks, Mark. Why don't we go to Jennifer?
Yeah, so I'm excited to hear what Emily has to say too. That was really good, Mark. But one of the things I want to mention is one of the ways we have found to engage employees, especially since 2020, is to get their spouses involved. And so we make sure we have the events regularly, even if it's virtual. We have done dinners and wine tastings virtually, but when we get the spouses involved, it helps us engage the employee by understanding their family more. We took our entire team, including spouses, on a trip on our annual kickoff. But what I have noticed is when you get the spouses involved, you get more engagement when you're interacting with the employee. But I noticed, for example, my own husband will ask me, "Did you do that project?" or "How'd that go?" Or he'll push me more, which makes me laugh. But my own husband will push me more now that he's interacted and knows all the other spouses. So I have seen that really bring our engagement as teams and as a company together more by again putting intentionality on the family as well as the employee.
That's great. Emily?
I love that, Jennifer. I've not heard of that before involving the spouses and the family, but I'm definitely going to take that back to my team. I love that. And I want to kind of thread the needle with what both you and Mark said about creating opportunities for people to connect locally. That really resonated with me because I'm thinking back to a survey that we sent out I don't know, during the second or third wave of COVID, kind of lost track. But at one point when we were preparing our hybrid return to the office plans as a company, we asked employees, what are you most looking forward to about coming back to the office? And by and large, the top response was, reconnecting with employees and colleagues and meeting new people. So that became a big input into the way we designed our return to office plans. And so on the one hand, we wanted to create company-wide spaces for employees to connect, having big on-site events and things like that. But we also saw from our data that, people are already in a lot of meetings, they're already pretty busy, and meetings with a lot of people in them gatherings tend to also be rated lower in terms of, being a good use of time and productivity. So kind of balancing those two data points led us to this multi-level strategy where we're planning large company events. We're giving people a platform to get together in person and remotely. But then we're also empowering managers to create spaces for their teams and really drive their own engagement in the way that makes sense to them. And so that's been a big part of our hybrid plans as well. That was informed by what we heard from our employees. And that was another thing I wanted to circle back on. The first thing you mentioned, Matt, was gathering meaningful feedback as a way to engage employees. And that's super important, but it's also really important that the intervention doesn't stop there. Like sending a survey isn't an intervention in and of itself, right? Like, if you want to earn employees' trust and keep getting them to take your surveys, you have to create that culture of employee listening where you just close the loop. And it can be as simple as sending an email like, hey, this is what we heard, and we're going to go action that feedback. You don't have to have all the answers right away. You don't have to say, this is exactly what we're going to go do because of what you said. And sometimes you could even say, this is what we heard and we're not able to action that at this time. And here's why. But you can say something, and showing that you've heard employees goes a really long way toward engaging them, even if you can't give them everything they want today, right? So that was something I just wanted to underscore today.
That's great. And that provides a great transition if we go back to our slides, because we do have an audience question that just popped up. So I'm going to show this slide, and then I'm going to ask the question to the panel. You can go ahead to the next slide on consistency. So we do have some stats today that says, hey, not only is engagement important, but the big benefit is that consistent experience, because that drives that higher engagement. So the question we have two different questions there. I'm going to combine them. It says, for the panel, what strategies can be implemented to ensure consistent communication or recognition or experiences support from leadership? So I want to go back to the panel and just talk about that. You brushed on it, Emily, but any strategies that all three of you use, and maybe we'll go around the horn again, Mark, Jennifer, then Emily, consistent communication or strategies around these?
So, at least in my experience, consistency is key to build trust. It's that unpredictability that gets people shaky, where you change your mind too much about things. And so having a really solid employee communication plan with specific deliverables pre-identified every quarter in advance or a couple of months in advance, as much as you have the resources to be able to plan, and keep driving home those themes of the company culture. Keep driving home the themes, like, as I mentioned, for us, it's respect, dignity, inclusivity, sense of belonging, treating people well, and taking care of one another. Those are constantly repeated in everything from our leadership monthly roundtables to our monthly communication. And it always has a note from our CEO. So the role modeling begins at the top around that culture and that consistency of communication. And I think when people keep hearing that and they keep experiencing that behavior from their own direct leaders, that builds that trust of consistency, which then leads to, I think, a more sustained employee engagement outcome.
Right. Jennifer?
Yeah, what Mark is saying is so critical. And Mark, we have challenges in our current company to do exactly that, to be consistent and not miss a communication opportunity to share from the top. And then for me, I know I've got the appropriate amount of direct reports. I never want to miss my one-on-ones, and I never want to miss the opportunity to have very candid conversations in those one-on-ones. And I've learned, I've had to teach some of my tech leadership that these are the questions, these are the times you ask the kind of questions that you get a real candid answer. And if you show candor and transparency, our CEO is amazing at that. I mean, everyone, he never trusts to just put on a brave face. When times are bad, we talk about it. When times are good, we celebrate it. But I just can't underscore enough of what you're saying, Mark, is that constant, that consistency. I've noticed, for example, if employees get a little wobbly when you start peeling back the layers of how are you really doing, what's really going on in this scenario, it's generally because they feel uncertain because they don't know what's going on. So for me, I can point back to that lack of communication to keep them engaged and keep them feeling secure. We're in such insecure times compared to 10 years ago that I know I've personally put more emphasis on making sure people feel secure in who they are at this company, what they're doing, and that we're okay. And so I just feel like that has moved up my list in my EQ stack of things I want to focus on. And so that comes from consistency.
Love that.
Emily?
Yeah, I don't think there's too much more I can add to this. I guess for consistency for my team, we just stay really closely partnered with our comms team. I have a weekly one-on-one actually with one of my comms partners just to get a sense of like, what's the calendar of company communications like this week, right? Like, how can we infuse some things that we've learned or reinforce some ways we're gathering feedback through our company-wide Slack channel messages, our homepage, emails that are going out. I really try to piggyback off of other comms that are going out to use those opportunities to talk about, hey, here's what we heard and here's what we're doing, just to kind of build that muscle over time. So no secret sauce, really. I just love my comms partners, and they do a lot to help us maintain that consistency.
Okay, that's great. Let's move on. We've talked about needs, and then we talked about engagement. And then we have this idea of recognizing employees. So the data supports, hey, everyone's recognizing employees until we talk to the employees, right? And so what are we seeing out there? We're seeing kind of 5 buckets of more frequent and more personal recognition. So what does that look like? Service markers. And, traditionally there was service markers for sales. Hey, let's Let's celebrate those that are bringing in the most dollars. Now we're seeing service markers all sorts of ways and automated, right? So 30 days of service, just 90 days attendance. We're seeing customer service marks. So many different ways to celebrate and recognize events within the employee life cycle, starting right out of the gates, right? Birthdays and anniversaries, automated, but also sent around to other people so we can celebrate that. We're seeing contests, and the contents aren't just around revenue, but other fun contests. So that could be volunteering, or that could be all sorts of ways where we have contests and leaderboards. And then we're seeing the learning and achievement. So the certificates, proficiencies, different types of skills that we didn't otherwise recognize. Now we're recognizing that amongst our peers, amongst the leadership. So more frequent, more personal recognition. Panel, what are you seeing today in terms of recognition, or what are you doing for your own organization or seeing in the marketplace? So we'll go to Jennifer this time first, then Emily and Mark.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with that mute button. So for us, I know one of the things I've seen that's worked really well for recognition is fostering the social recognition from peers. So I know one of the other two may speak on what they're doing for recognition, but I really want to highlight that the more we get team members and people to recognize each other, and based on values demonstration, not just performance demonstration. So I love the way, Mark, you said respect, dignity, responsibility. The more you see, so whatever your company values are, you see recognition on the values demonstration, then that social recognition, I think, has been so valuable in this era we're in, because I notice people standing a little taller, smiling a little bigger. I just can see a little pep in their step when I do get to be around them from being recognized by their peers. And the other thing it's done is it's illuminated how teams are interconnected. Like I can follow the data or follow the pattern of who recognizes who for which values demonstration, and then how they are interconnected, which helps me support them more. So I just want to highlight that for recognition, that often companies, I know in my past, it was all about achievement, but we're in a different time frame, and we need to recognize more than just their job achievement as well.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, Emily?
Yeah, lots of good anecdotes there, Jennifer. I think, yeah, rewarding the personal achievements too is a big one. I mean, benefits I personally enjoy at Intuit are, I guess the top two that really delighted me when I first joined was the birthday PTO. I'd never had that before, so everyone gets a day off to take within 2 weeks of their birthday. And if you don't take it within 2 weeks, then you lose that time. And that's a good reinforcement to make sure that you take it. So that's a delighter. And then Intuit also does spotlight bonuses. So you're actually giving people cash for rewarding, or not a gift card, but with Amazon and Wayfair, and those are my top two, but all the places you could use the gift card, you can actually give people something to treat themselves with for, doing their job really well or going out of their way for you. So I really like those two things. But one thing that I really wanted to touch on that you mentioned, Jennifer, was that peer-to-peer recognition. When we have a question on our engagement survey about the recognition that you receive, and then we let employees give comments. And what we find when people respond to that question is that they mention 3 different groups of people in kind of informing the recognition that they get. It's their peers, it's their managers, and it's their senior leaders. And, a lot of people are actually surprised to hear, that their peers really provide that. But that's a huge opportunity to kind of create, not just recognize people yourself, but create that culture of recognition. And if you create a team where they're recognizing each other, That is golden. That is free. It's something that makes everyone feel good, and something chronically lacking in our organizations. I think if you look at your company and there are no forcing function or kind of no mechanisms to provide recognition, I think you can assume it's not happening enough, or it's not happening to people's satisfaction. So we really have to be intentional about creating spaces and reinforcing that culture of recognition, especially in high performance cultures. That's where we see recognition tend to be lower, and really want to focus on that.
Great. Mark?
So, wow, some great insights and great tips there from both Jennifer and Emily. I think the peer-to-peer recognition, likewise, is so critically valuable because everybody wants to look, they want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to know that they made a difference, right? Even if it's their own job or they made a difference to the team or to the company, depending upon what their scope of responsibility is. We've institutionalized something in all of our meetings called shout outs. And it's just kind of a practice that we do. And we do it at our monthly roundtable led by the CEO. And it's like the top, probably we have about 350 people that attend from around the world. And it's a chance to talk about a theme, but as part of that agenda, it's always, we don't end until we have shout outs. And that's peer-to-peer recognition within that group. And then we do it in team meetings, and we do it in just informally, a shout out. But the other thing, the peer-to-peer, we formalize called the Rave Awards. And it's where peers nominate peers. And also they can nominate others too. But generally it's a peer-to-peer formal quarterly event. And it's all virtually sponsored around the world, and they get an award. There's a little bit of cash with it if they win, and it's tied to our value statements. So how are you exhibiting this particular kind of value? And it's all nominated by a peer. The other thing we do is internally employee communication. If somebody's done something extraordinary, we let people know about that. We had one situation where an agent helped a healthcare insurance company member literally save their life because they weren't calling 911. They called their insurance card, and we answered the phone, got a hold of the the authorities where this elderly lady lived, and literally saved her life. Well, that's worth an accolade, right? Most definitely in any company that would be worth an accolade. And of course, there's the social media. We have a learning and development program, and they earn badges as they complete the modules for the certification. And then we applaud them and put that on social media and give them a shout out and say, congratulations on your achievement. So you can get really creative and do all kinds of different things. But again, it goes back to the purposefulness to the employee, the relevance to the employee, and staying within the culture and values of your company that really matter with recognition.
Great tips across the board here. Okay, so we've covered engagement, needs, and recognition. And we want to go by real quick. Good old-fashioned thank you notes. They go a long way in today's world. So if we look at, on our next slide, why do engagement? All right. And I want to cover this, and then we have a question for the panel here. What is the return on investment for employee engagement? Well, a lot of this is common sense, right? We have higher employee productivity if we're feeling better, lower turnover. We get higher revenue per employee, lower absenteeism. And ultimately, that results in higher customer satisfaction, right? We're feeling good about where we're at. We're able to provide better service to our customers. So we've got a question for the panel that came in. It said, how do we track this engagement and recognition to performance or productivity? So that's a touchy one. I want to say for our panel, how are you tracking this, if so, and any recommendations for the listeners? So let's start off with, why don't we go back to Mark on this? And
Sure. Be happy to. So one of the things that we've done is we've taken a look at not only the engagement, but what are the business outcomes we're really after, and how does engagement fit into that? How do we use engagement as a potential path toward achieving these business outcomes, both financially as well as reputationally in the market, et cetera. And so we focused on employee engagement with the idea that we need to drive employee attrition down. In the business process outsourcing world, BPO, and in call centers, attrition can run high, just industry-wide. We made it a mission to form the War on Attrition initiative, and we brought together the key stakeholders that have a part of that, came up with a plan, and then we whittled that down to 4 people and held them accountable, each a representative of those units, those organizations. And what we found is when we applied the strategies, involved the people in coming up with a solution, and then we acted on those strategies, our attrition dropped tremendously. So agent attrition was triple digits. It's well below that now in just 1.5 years. So by tracking that metric, we can tell that a number of the strategies, including employee engagement and other parts of the solution, really work. The other one is attendance. Happier people want to come to work. Instead of playing hooky, as we used to call it in school, we would, do the right thing and go to school and like that. But if you feel tired, you're like, oh, I don't want to go. Well, the same thing is true with adults at work. Sometimes you just can't stand up to it that day. So what we find is if you make employee engagement interesting, active, inclusive, people feel they have a part to play. They don't want to miss out on what's going on. And we watched attendance drop. And the third thing is medical claims have dropped. That if you're a self-insured company and you have a budget that you're paying for with claims and premiums and all of that, when you pay attention to people's wellness, emotional wellness, nutritional wellness, food insecurities, and have strategies to address real human issues, then those humans respect you a lot more in the market and as their employer. We've literally just last week met with our broker and reviewed our 2023 stats, and our medical claims fortunately fell far short of our budget. They were much lower than our budget. So we see those 3 metrics as having a real good business impact as well as reputational and employer branding as well.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. All right, why don't we go Jennifer and then Emily?
Yeah, so I think in my current world, we only really tie employee engagement back to customer satisfaction, which we get a lot of feedback from our customers, and we're intentional about that. And we have almost no employee turnover, to be honest. Our stats are unbelievable because we do tend to act less hierarchical and more like a family. So for us, we can definitely attribute employee engagement to productivity, very low turnover, and then our higher customer satisfaction. And certainly in my last several years, the customer satisfaction, feedback has been critical to us. And then, of course, taking that back as recognition really helps. So, looking at this graph, I'm like, I've got some work to do, but that's kind of a current state and how we are able to really keep our finger on the pulse of employee engagement.
Great. And Emily?
Yeah, we really use our engagement scores as kind of the voice of truth of the employee experience. So it's embedded in nearly everything that we do. If you're an Intuit employee and you open our company-wide dashboard that tracks all of our big goals and metrics as a company, at the very top, we have our engagement score. And so that really sets the tone for, the visibility of how much we want to integrate that into everything that we do. And so we're constantly doing analyses with that to see, okay, which of these survey items predicts attrition? What do we want to focus on for the year as an HR org and beyond? We do track changes in scores on engagement and other topics on the survey against some of our key HR initiatives to kind of measure success as more of a distal outcome, right? Like there's other things that you want to track along the way. But it's a key thing of everything that we do. And I think one of the reasons for that is that our CEO cares very deeply about the culture of the company and engagement as a reflection of that.
That's great. It reminds me of the late, great Peter Drucker that said, culture eats strategy for lunch. And having that front and center is pretty impressive, Emily, on the employee dashboard. Okay, we're going to move into our final slide here. To win the marketplace, you must first win the workplace, from the late, great Doug Conant. So what we're going to do is we're going to close up our presentations, and we're right at the 46-minute mark, and so we're going to do the 2-minute drill. So for all of our audience members, before we give it back to our panelists, I'm going to thank you in advance for joining. And secondly, we are going to send out, for all those that are registered, profiles of our 3 great panelists today. They'll link to their LinkedIn profiles. And for all the questions we didn't get to today, because they're still coming in, we do have an opportunity to respond. So we have a couple HR engagement leaders, some of our senior folks. You can set a meeting with them, or simply ask a question, or you can get a copy of this seminar, all of which will come out to you. So you'll receive an email and have an opportunity to respond. So with that, we're going to go around the horn. And this time we're going to start with Emily, and then we'll go to Mark, and then we'll end up with Jennifer. And just 2 minutes, final summary. Covered a lot of ground here. Any other tips, advice, thoughts for all those attending today? So we'll start with Emily.
It's no small task to try to summarize a great conversation, and just really appreciate Jennifer and Mark's insights on this. So I won't take up too much time. I really want to hear what they have to say. But I think, one of the things I encourage leaders to do often, and I mentioned it earlier on this call, is just getting that feedback, finding ways to encourage employees' voices, gather that feedback, and then make sure you follow up. Because I'm sure we've all heard this at some point, but asking for feedback and doing nothing with it is worse than not asking at all. So I leave you with that encouragement to be fearless in going out and collecting that data, but then also being very transparent with employees to share with them what you heard, and what you're doing about it, because that's the piece to employee listening that's very important, is making people feel heard, and that's how you do that, by telling them.
Great. Okay, Mark.
So first, Emily and Jennifer, it was a pleasure serving with you. I learned so much from you both, and I'm going to take away a lot of great ideas from you. And Matt, thanks so much for inviting me, and for the Advantage Club for sponsoring this. I guess my final thought is the way that you treat employees and the way that you engage employees is all about the sincere behavior and the role modeling as leaders that you conduct yourself, right? In the workplace and around the workplace. And it starts with the CEO. I love what I've heard out of both Jennifer and Emily about how their CEOs are role models for employee engagement and culture, because it starts there, and the senior leadership team. The CEO can't abdicate to the senior leadership team, and the senior leadership team can't abdicate below. They all have to be working together like cogs in the clock wheel. And so be that role model yourselves, I guess, is what I would say is the tip. Be that role model, and the results will come.
Great. Jennifer?
Yeah, I also want to say thank you. It's been such a pleasure to learn from Mark and Emily. I've got 2 pages of notes here, and I recognize how much work I still have to do, which is a good thing. But I think my message, or my summary, would be that as leaders, the greatest privilege in our lives should be working with the people that we get to steward. I mean, we get to impact and influence lives. And so not to engage people, not to pull the gold out of them, so to speak, not to find which button to push and lever to pull with the way they are wired and what they need to do their best work is just a crime. So I just think it's such a privilege and an honor to talk about how we can make the most out of the place we spend the most time in, right? We spend most of our week at work. And so why not make it such an engaged, fully alive, fully productive, fully active environment? So it's just, I've taken some real nuggets, and this has just been a pleasure. So thank you.
Great. And with that, we're wrapped up today. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you all for joining us today. And we'll touch base with you here this afternoon with an email. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.